Hello, welcome back to the channel and New Vegas. As I do apologise, this video was a wee bit delayed, such as the reality of having chronic health problems. But we're back in Vegas to talk about episode 5, the Wrangler. So it's probably kind of obvious to most New Vegas players what we're referring to when we say that. But everything is kind of focused around Mr. House, about Hank McLean, and about Cooper Howard and his past, as well as what's happening with our Vault 31 crew and Norms. That's who is featured in this week's episode. So basically, after the recap, we pick up pretty much exactly where we left off. In the previous episode, where the strip has a slight infestation of Deathclaws, one bursting out of Gamora, but as we discover, there's several more of them, and there's eggs. So they've been there for a while. They've obviously been settled and breeding. And later on, when we are at the Atomic Wrangler, the bartender does mention that they came up from Quarry Junction. So Quarry Junction is kind of to the south. So it's the reason that you can't just go straight north from Good Springs to get to the strip, and you have to go. Well, in theory, you have to go the long way round. Is because Quarry Junction, having a complete brain melt there. But yeah, Quarry Junction is one of the reasons that you should be careful heading straight north from where you start the game, because it's home with Deathclaws, and Deathclaws, the name kind of applies. They're pretty dangerous things. But it's kind of curious why they would move from Quarry Junction up to the strip. Were they driven out by something more dangerous? Were they lured here with the promise of better hunting grounds because of all the gamblers and whatnot to eat, or something else? It's kind of interesting, but I kind of loved how the dog, who I think is now going by Dog Meat, is just like, nope, I'm out, bye, and just runs through the gate. Which is fair enough when you're facing, a number of Deathclaws. Noping out of there is a reasonable course of action. Um, so that's fair enough. But the ghoul seems to kind of remember that fire freaks out the abomination. So that's a mechanic in this game, particularly. I can't remember if it was added by Lonesome Road, but it certainly features in Lonesome Road as well, which is one of the DLCs where um, what are classed as abominations are scared off by fire. So particularly that applies to the tunnelers in the Divide, which are mutated humans. I did a video on them quite recently, and if you fire a flare gun at them or use a flashbang, then they freak out and run away. And the same applies to Deathclaws in that DLC, and also in the Mojave Wasteland as well. So hard to say, but it buys them the time they need to get out of there, and we end up back in Freeside. So we'll head there. This should take us out to Freeside, I think. So we end up back in Freeside, and the ghoul kind of explains a bit more about what he's doing to Lucy. So the fact that he's looking for his wife and his daughter, or possibly ex-wife and daughter, and that he knows that they're in a special vault for management, but he discovered that there was actually several of these vaults that were special vaults for management, and every one that he went to was empty. So he found one in California and he found one in Oregon as well. Both of them were empty, but he never found one in Vegas. So he is kind of like, well, sounds great. So yeah, the Silver Rush, that's a kind of reference to the Golden Nugget, which is in this part of Las Vegas, and they sell energy weapons in there. But we end up here. So the Wrangler, the title probably comes from this place, which is the Atomic Wrangler, which is a casino, bar, and brothel in Freeside that services the locals that can't afford to go to the strip, basically. Um, but obviously, he's been searching for the vault where his wife and daughter are for a long, long time. Um, and he's kind of explaining that he never found one here in Vegas. So obviously, there's a lot of speculation about where this facility is, because we know that there is a vault on the strip, which is Vault 21. Very fitting number for the vault that's underneath Las Vegas. But the experiment in that vault was basically, and as Mr. House's kind of pet project, most likely, given the way he is, it kind of makes sense that this would be what he would choose, where essentially all kind of major decisions and disputes would be solved by games of chance, by gambling. So, and then the whole thing with Mr. House was that he wanted to take control of the vault, and they wouldn't let him, and they basically had to, they had a game of chance to make that decision, and the house won. Mr. House won that, so he filled in most of Vault 21 with concrete, at least that's what we were told he did. And then the Sarah Weintraub managed to talk him into letting her keep it open and run it as a hotel and casino. So the kind of upper floors were left intact, and she was allowed to keep running it. So it could be that there's a secret section of Vault 21 that only Mr. House and maybe a handful of his employees know about, like Hank McLean potentially, or he's got another facility somewhere. I mean, if you look from the room where Mr. House is in the Lucky 30 underneath it, it goes down quite far, and you know, there's could be far, far more to that underground section of it than where Mr. House's actual body is and all his machines, and also the demonstration area that you go to see the upgraded Securitrons. There could be far more in there than what we see in the game, a possibility as well, but I guess we'll find out eventually. One thing that I did enjoy is all the background stuff in Freeside, because I say in the game, Freeside doesn't really look that busy. I mean, there are, you know, there's people, the kings are wandering about, you do occasionally get attacked by muggers and whatnot in Freeside, and there are people pottering about, but compared to in the TV show, it's quite a busy wee place, and I just kind of love the background. You know, it's really quite funny, like you see the way people are dressed, like there's women walking about with the feathery headdresses and things, like they just walked off a burlesque stage. So it's obviously stuff that they've just found in places and kind of pieced these random outfits together, and I just thought it was really quite interesting. It made the place look a lot kind of more interesting and a lot more populated as well, and that's something that's important to note when you compare. I mean, everybody loves to compare Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3, but comparing the Mojave Wasteland with the Capital Wasteland, the Mojave Wasteland actually survived a lot better because of Mr. House, which we'll get into all that later on. But most of the bombs that were fired at this part of the United States didn't land. It was only a small percentage of them that actually hit. And that means that less people died, people survived, and while there was radiation that caused ghouls and caused problems, not to the same degree, whereas, you know, the Capital Wasteland, which is Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area, unsurprisingly, given that's the seat of power of the United States, when you've got the White House, you've got the Pentagon, you've got all these government facilities, that would be a big target, because, you know, that's, if you want to destroy a nation, then targeting the capital city is kind of a given, really, in that respect. So, you know, it kind of makes sense, but because of that, there was so much damage done to that area that society in any capacity didn't really survive. Any settlements that do exist are pretty isolated. There's trade caravans that go around, but people don't tend to wander the Capital Wasteland, not in the same way that people wander the Mojave, you know, and travelling back and forward to California and all that kind of thing. Not many people do that kind of stuff. But I liked the way Freeside looked in the background and things is kind of interesting, although I say we still don't really know exactly what happened to the Kings, unfortunately, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, I think the inside of the Atomic Wrangler looks great, so I'm going to actually pop in there. The set work on this show is absolutely brilliant. I say it doesn't look exactly the same, but you know, the set design and stuff that they've done, I think, is phenomenal. But yeah, this is the Atomic Wrangler as it appears in the game, and you've got this bar, and then there's rooms upstairs. There's a stage. This guy, Hadrian, so he's a comedian that performs here occasionally as a ghoul. We've got some gambling tables and what you would expect to find, and that's great. But hi, but I think I kind of enjoyed the conversation with the bartender and the ghoul here. Well, let's say that it was mainly a conversation with the bartender because he was the one that was doing all the talking. But I thought that was kind of interesting to listen to. He kind of said something about a change in management when he was talking about the Deathclaws, and that's a fun little nod to the quest that involves you setting up Yes Man. So in the Lucky 38 in the game, you can get rid of Mr. House, you can kill him, and then put Yes Man installed into his system instead. And that quest is called Change in Management. So that's a fun little nod. And I also mentioned something about at least the Deathclaws don't charge taxes, and tax was the NCR's thing, being a sort of nation when if they win the end of the game and take over New Vegas and take over the dam, then one of the issues with the NCR taking over is that their taxes are quite high and people are unhappy about having to pay as much money in order to, be allowed to run their businesses or whatever it is, So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's just mentioning a few of these things, but the ghoul tells him to shut up and go away. Fair enough. And I think when he's sitting there and he's looking at his reflection in the mirror, there isn't one here, but, he's looking at his reflection in the mirror. And I think that's really interesting. It really shows how good an actor Walton Goggins is. I say I hadn't really seen him in much before this show. There's a couple of things that I'd seen him in previously, but it really does show, I think, how good he is as an actor, because we can see what he's thinking, we can see what he's feeling without him saying a word. His expression says an awful lot about what he's thinking about. And that's something that, we've been seeing on and off about his character, because obviously he's been a human before the war and he's still alive as a ghoul and he's still looking for his family. He's gone on this massive journey spanning 200 plus years. And the kind of stuff that he's been through is going to change a person. And whenever in fiction a character's looking at themselves in a mirror, you always told, don't start writing a story with a character looking in the mirror and describing their own appearance, because that's not realistic. But there's a symbolism to a character looking in the mirror, or looking at their reflection in water, and it's all about them internally reflecting on something. So thinking about maybe their regrets, their decisions, thinking about the past, thinking about the person they've become, that kind of thing. So it's often a symbol that a person's internally reflecting on something. And that's kind of the theme for all the main protagonists. So we've got the Ghoul, we've got Maximus, we've got Lucy. All three of these characters are people who have had their entire worldview upended, everything's been turned upside down, and they are having to try and navigate the situation and learning things and losing family figures, essentially, because Lucy, she obviously idolised her father, and now she's learned what he did and who he really is, and she wants to bring him to justice, but she obviously still cares for him because he's still the man that raised her as far as she's concerned. So she's having to deal with these conflicting versions of her father and trying to come to terms with all of that. Maximus lost his first family and was rescued when Shady Sands was destroyed and kind of was adopted by the Brotherhood. And again, he felt that's all he knew. And then he's kind of realising that, Quintus isn't really a good guy and doesn't align with his values. And then he thought, when he spoke to Xander Harkness, he thought, oh, well, maybe, the other parts of the Brotherhood are better. And then Xander was like, no, we're just going to murder some children. So Maximus is just like, I'm out of this. And again, he's having to reckon with all this and reckon with his own morals and having to make the decisions and do what he feels is the right thing instead of what he feels like he's obligated to do. And then Cooper Howard obviously becoming the Ghoul, losing his family, the fact that he played a big role in, potentially the end of the world, and certainly in allowing people to be go into these vaults to be experimented on and things. I say we don't know the full details of that, but he's lost his daughter in the meantime, and he's lost his wife, and the breakdown of that relationship. And then obviously it's very clear that he's done some pretty unsavoury things as he's pursuing this single goal of finding out where his wife is, where his daughter is, and finding his family again. And that's what drives him to keep going. But he's having to reckon with the fact that it's turned him into the kind of person that the old him really wouldn't want to be. So, that's the thing. And I think this moment where he's sitting in the mirror, I mean, it's such a small moment, but again, I feel like it really humanises him and reminds us of the man that he used to be, who did things that he maybe later regretted, who did things he wasn't proud of, and had to deal with an awful lot of things happening in his life. And then being forced to kind of live forever essentially, and having to, figure out how he's going to deal with that situation. Just like when he was talking to the dog. So he's still, he's a man that got caught up between trying to protect his family and trying to do the right thing for his nation. And now his nation's gone, he's focusing on finding his family. And then we do shift back to the pre-war era, which I think is really interesting. I do like how we start off on the Galaxy News report, and it's shown in a 4:3 aspect ratio, whereas the modern standard for us now is 16:9. Widescreen has become pretty much the standard in the last couple of decades for television. But obviously the technology and fallout for TVs and computers and things is still stuck a few decades behind what we have. It's older, so it would fit that it fits into that kind of appearance of what we would call an old-fashioned TV. So that's fair enough. But I like how they started that, and then obviously the aspect ratio shifted when we zoomed out from the TV screen into the airport. So we're all on our way to Vegas, and Hank has a briefcase of something chained to his wrist. Presumably that's going to be the cold fusion tech thingy, and that's, obviously his responsibility to take it with him when they go to see Mr. House, because that's why they're going to Vegas, is to sell that technology to Mr. House. So fair enough. But yeah, it's interesting, and I definitely could recognise a couple of the actors that are part of Norm's crew from Vault 31 in the background there. So obviously there's a whole bunch of employees that are going to this event at the Lucky 38 as well, to be part of the whole thing. So kind of interesting to have that in the background as well. But yeah, it's really nice to see Vegas in its heyday, I think. The way this version of Vegas actually looked before the bombs destroyed everything and everything fell apart. I really like that. And I saw that, Vault 21 was open as a casino and hotel. And I think some people are maybe kind of questioning that. But Barb kind of explains it to us, and it kind of makes sense to me. Vault 21 obviously had been built at that point, and one of the things that makes sense to me is that it's a marketing thing. So I don't see it as being a problem that it was open as a hotel and casino before the bombs, and then didn't become one, and then it became sealed, obviously, when the bombs fell and all the rest of it. Because obviously there was a big marketing campaign which Cooper Howard played a huge role in. He starred in advertisements, there's photographs, his face is on billboards and things all over the place. advertising the vaults, and Vault 21 is definitely Mr. House's vault. The choice of experiment makes sense for him. Everything, and the fact that it's in his beloved Vegas, that all ties into that quite nicely, in my opinion. So it would make sense. And Barb does say this. She says, how successful the adverts that Cooper did have been, for the uptake and people paying for placements in the vaults. So having Vault 21 open, I think, before the bombs, it kind of fills two roles. One is profit. Mr. House, is an autocrat. He wants to make as much money as possible. So he's going to do that whatever way he can. So having this vault open here, before the bombs, so people are, they're paying to stay the night there. They're gambling, which obviously is always profitable. So it would be a way for him to just squeeze as much profit out of the place as possible before it got sealed up when the bombs fell. It could even be that the original Vault 21 dwellers were just people that got lucky and they happened to be staying there when the bombs fell. Who knows? But the other thing is having the vault open to the public in this way. It could be a great marketing strategy for Vault Tech, because people getting to see probably one of the best versions of a Better Future Underground, and seeing it for themselves, then they would potentially choose to sign up and fork over the stupid amounts of money. We see that elsewhere as well. There's the demonstration vault in LA, there's the exhibit at the Museum of Technology in DC, and there's an exhibit at Nuka World that Vault Tech created. Again, it's showing people this is what your life could be like in a vault. So if the worst happens, this is how nice it is. And that's, that's something people are more likely to buy when they know what they're getting and when they know what value they're getting for their money. That's the way business works, is that people that get to see what the vault's like, and Vault 21 is one of the nicest vaults. The experiment in there is pretty harmless because it was just all about gambling. So people weren't sacrificing each other or turning each other into giant axolotl monsters or whatever. It was just about gambling. So it's the kind of best case scenario for people, so they could stay the night there and think, you know what, this isn't too bad. At least if the end of the world is coming, maybe I want to actually pay the money to get a space in a vault, and things. So it's just like if you're going to Costco and you get the wee free samples of cheese or whatever. It's the exact same thing. It's a marketing technique, letting people try before they buy, letting people experience what they could get if they hand over their hard-earned money. There's drunk NCR troopers all over the place here. So I don't think that really breaks the law at all. I think that makes perfect sense, and I say it would make Mr. House a little bit of extra money, which he's always going to be happy about. So that makes sense to me. But then there's that incident with the congresswoman that was there before, and she's protesting about corporate influence in government, which is an important thing to think about. That's all I'm going to say on that topic. But she's not happy about how much influence these big corporations are having in government policy and things like that. So fair enough. But that moment when she's kind of thrown to the ground on the steps of the Lucky 38, and everyone kind of stops to look, and that's a phenomenon that's a real phenomenon called the bystander effect, where if something happens to someone, the more people are around, the less likely it is that someone will go and help the person, because everybody just kind of stands and thinks, oh, somebody else will do it, so I don't need to. And then everybody just kind of stands there staring and nobody does anything to help the person. But Cooper is the one that kind of breaks that and goes and helps her up and everything, and supports her, which I think is quite interesting, because again, that's pointing to a man that does care about people and wants to keep people safe. And given what he becomes, I think that's quite an important contrast for his character there. But it's now been confirmed that the man that played Mr. House in season 1 and has been on the TV spots and things is a body double. That's what we thought makes sense. He's been doing it for a decade, but that's who he is, so makes sense. And then he obviously says to Cooper, Mr. House wants to see you, confirming to Cooper that this is a body double. And Howard Hughes did that too. That's been confirmed that he used body doubles for public appearances. And Robert House is very, very much based on Howard Hughes and some of the stuff that he did. So all kind of ties into his character, and it means that the real Robert House can go and stalk people in the men's room and that kind of thing whenever he feels like it, because nobody knows what he really looks like. So, you know, interesting little kind of trick there, I think, from the House there. I love Mr. House as a character, both in the game and in the TV show. I really do. He's fascinating. But also, look how shiny Victor is. You know, that like, because the Securitrons you see in the game, they do look a wee bit on the tarnish side, you know, they're starting to get a wee bit rusty and whatnot, and Victor's all shiny and new there. Love it. Absolutely love it. And that first shot of the penthouse, in fact, let's head up there if we can. So that first shot of the penthouse in the Lucky 38, where you walk out and you see, you know, the big window and the screen. Yeah, I might have caused that disturbance, but you know, and you can see right over all of Vegas and everything from here. Doesn't quite work so well with the game engine, but you know, it's a phenomenal shot. And Mr. House is sitting in the chair in front of all these big screens and things. I think he might actually be dead at this point in this save file, but anyway, you know, it fantastic shot, and I think it all looks fantastic. It looks great. And we will come back to the other plot threads later, but I think Cooper's line here when he's like, from the fucking toilet, like he obviously recognised him. I thought that was hilarious. But also that Mr. House knows about the assassination plot. Now, this doesn't really come as a huge surprise because Mr. House knows everything, or at least he thinks he can know or learn everything. It's part of his whole character, so we need to kind of talk more about what happens in the pre-war scenes here. It's really quite important to the whole story. So Mr. House had access to the T-45. He made a deal with West Tech to get access to software that would allow him to actually see what the soldiers were seeing in the power armor. So he saw the moment where Cooper saw the Deathclaws slaughtering all the Chinese soldiers and things. So he knows about that, and he knew about the Deathclaws before the bombs fell as well, which I think is really interesting. And again, this all makes total sense for Mr. House's character, because you know, he plans, he calculates, and he predicts. That's what he does, which means that he needs to gather data, and a lot of data, because the more data he can get his hands on, the more accurate his calculations and predictions are going to be. That's the nature of these things, and it's the secret to his success, both, you know, pre-war as a businessman. I mean, he lost his inheritance because his half-brother screwed him over. So he built everything from the ground up. And I think it's a real testament to the man's genius, really, that he managed to do that, and the fact that he has this ability to understand business, understand politics, understand economics, society, and psychology as well. He has a real understanding of people, which means that he can make these calculations, he can make these predictions, because he can see a lot of it will be like pattern recognition. So, you know, the way the economy goes, which I don't understand economics very well, to be honest, it's not my area of expertise, but you know, being able to see the patterns and predict, you know, if this happens, then it's very likely that that's going to happen, and being able to calculate these probabilities and things, that's what Mr. House did. And all of his technology is everywhere. You know, I mean, obviously this is his place, so all his technology's here, but the Pit Boys that all the Vault Dwellers are using, the terminals that literally everybody's using, have his operating system. His robots are everywhere because the Protectrons are Robco, Securitrons obviously are Robco, the Assaultrons are Robco. He also had a partnership with General Atomics, so he did have a role in all the Mr. Handy line and the Sentry bots and all the rest of it. So, you know, his technology is literally everywhere, and that gives him the, you know, the capacity to have a backdoor that he can use to collect even more data to spy on people, you know, spy on um corporations and things, so that if he wants to acquire something, he can strike at the exact right time for him to maximize the benefits to him and things like that. So, you know, it kind of explains that. Um, and I think it's really, really interesting because he obviously did have a lot um, going on there and he knew what was going to happen. But what he doesn't like, as he states, is unknown variables. So people that are unpredictable, that go against his calculations, that don't fit nicely into this predictability. Um, and he explains all this to Cooper. He talks about the missile system. So obviously, Cooper's supposed to assassinate House because they think that the missile system he's building is what's going to be used to end the world. But he does say that he's intending to do the opposite, and we know that from the game that was always the plan. Was he wanted to protect Vegas. He didn't manage to do it completely because the platinum chip didn't arrive in time before the bombs fell. So, you know, there was a bit of a miscalculation and mistiming there, and that resulted in the fact that House didn't have as much control as he wanted for a long time. But he knows that, you know, he's intending to defend Vegas. He doesn't believe that Vault-Tec are actually going to be the ones to drop the bombs, but this is always the question: was who did it? Who's going to do it? That's the question that we still don't have an answer for, and I don't know if we'll ever get a definitive answer for that because it takes some of the mystery out of it. But he knows that Cooper Howard's going to be involved in some way, and it seems to be something related to his wife and his daughter, because all this data coalesced and it came together the day that Janie was born. And we know that was the year, so 26.5 is the year that was well stated in the lore. That's when House had realised nuclear war's going to happen, guaranteed it's going to happen within the next 15 years. And it was a question of how that was going to happen and how that Janie and Cooper and Barb factor into this calculation as well. So I'm not entirely sure why Janie's birthday is the date that matters to this, but my thought is that it's something to do with the fact that obviously, you know, whatever Barb has done, she loves her daughter, she wants to protect her daughter. That's what she always stated her motivation was. But you know, there's definitely something sinister about her as well. She's the mastermind behind all the vaults. You know, we learn that in this episode that she was Bud Askin's boss. She was above him and she had to approve all the vault experiments. She authorised the experiments that were proposed by the investors and internal. So she is the one that gave the okay for Vault 11, Vault 12, Vault 4, Vault 87, you know, all of these horrible experiments, the ones that were done where children were separated from their parents and then genetically bred to be stronger and faster super soldiers, she agreed to allow like an entire vault of people used for medical experimentation by a secret second part of the vault. She agreed to do all of that. She approved all of that. And it really takes a certain kind of person to do that. So it could be, you know, it could be that the motivation is to try and protect her family. Is that her reason that she wants to protect her child, or is there another reason to that? And you kind of wonder. I say definitely have a bit of a theory that Cooper Howard ended up in Vault 12 because he mentions going to Bakersfield several times, we still haven't got that confirmed or denied either way, but if he did, then would she have known that? You'd think that she would have maybe noticed his name on the list of residents or something. Um, we know they separated before the bombs fell, but that doesn't mean that she wasn't keeping tabs on him in any capacity. And we do keep jumping back and forth between the kind of current time and the past, as Cooper Howard and the Ghoul both kind of go through these kind of parallel situations essentially. But we know that Mr. House had no intention of dropping the bombs, and he really didn't think that Vault-Tec was going to do it either. But he starts to get more emotional and more worked up, and Cooper is wrestling with the conflicting kind of stories and the conflicting things that he's been sent to kill this man because Kate Williams thinks that he's the one that's going to end the world, but now Mr. House is saying, no, I'm trying to protect my city. I have no intention of doing that, any such thing, and I don't believe that Vault-Tec are going to do it either. And so Cooper's now like, what am I supposed to do here? And he's torn, having to make this kind of a decision, because obviously if he just goes ahead and kills House, that's not something that you can take back, no matter how good your technology is, really. Once it's done, it's done. So he's having this conflict, and he loses his nerve, and he turns to the bottle, which it's something that a lot of people do when they're dealing with any kind of stress, turning to drinking, and we can see from the future that that hasn't changed with him, and it's something that a lot of people do. I think it's worth noting that addiction is a symptom rather than a cause in the majority of cases. People that do succumb to alcoholism, that succumb to addiction, they do so because of another underlying issue, whether it's mental health problems, trauma. There's all kinds of things that could push somebody to start doing that. And it's something that I think, people are often quick to judge without really understanding that there's an underlying reason that people are turning to these things to try and kind of self-medicate to cope with whatever their situation is. So, and most of the time these people, to my mind, they deserve sympathy more than anything else. I do like the layout of this cocktail lounge though. It's quite fun. So I think we need to keep that sort of thing in mind here. But then we see he ends up passing out, obviously very, very drunk. And we see Barb tending to him, and he says, yeah, we need to talk. And that's where it's left for this episode. So I guess we'll find out more about what happens there. But then we end up back in 2296. And Lucy is dealing with a difficult situation. She's been given some caps to go and get some Addictol, which is supposed to help her with her buff out addiction. But when she gets to the shop, everything's been marked up massively. So suddenly, one dose of Addictol is 1,000 caps from like 250, which is kind of wacky. So she doesn't have enough money to buy the stuff, so she's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna leave then." But then she spots an open back door and thinks, "Okay." But you can see that she's feeling like she's being forced to go against her own moral judgment. But the way she's feeling dealing with this addiction and things, and knowing that it's not a good thing to allow to continue for her physical well-being, she makes a decision and she goes in to steal it, and then she notices a power fist, which is apparently priced at 10,000 caps, which is bonkers. So that's a bit of a weird situation. But she steals the power fist as well, because why not? Um, and she's about to leave, noticing that there's suddenly a huge markup on everything in this shop. So she's about to leave before she gets caught. And then she spots the naked dead guy in the barrel. Like, okay. So she's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. Questions need to be asked. And then this guy appears, and she puts together exactly what happens. This guy came in, killed the original owner, and took over. and bumped up all his prices to try and make a wee bit of money. But she's smart enough to figure out that that's what happened, and she intended, I think, a non-lethal shot, but she didn't. She killed the guy, and she's having to deal with, again, her own morals and going against what she believes is right, in order to survive, because that's what the wasteland does to you. You know, it's pushing you all the time. It's pushing you to make decisions to survive, and potentially then having to do things that you don't really feel good about, that you feel you shouldn't be doing. So it's understandable that she's really kind of struggling to deal with this, and the fact that she's just killed this guy. But she leaves, and she takes the Dictol. If anything in the background happened in this little scene, I didn't see it. So I have a metaphobia, which is a fear of vomiting. I cannot cope with vomiting, especially people. Just about can cope with it with dogs and cats, because being a vet, I had no choice. But I don't deal well with it when it's people. Unfortunately, I'm very squeamish. I'm not squeamish about much, blood, guts, gore, all that stuff doesn't bother me, but vomiting does. So, yeah. But she gets to the Wrangler, and she finds the Ghoul, and he's being very sympathetic to her situation. Obviously, purging this addiction from her system. It's not a nice process, especially when you're expediting the process using something like a Dictol, or I think in this game it was Fixer was the one. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Yeah, Fixer, which is temporary, but and he is treating her with kindness here, and they have become more friendly, and it does seem like, I know I've seen people online saying this, and it does seem like there is a bit of a kind of paternal relationship developing here, where the Ghoul is feeling paternal to Lucy, and she's feeling like she's got another father figure, and they were getting along quite well. And this moment is bittersweet. But we're going to backtrack a little bit to earlier in the episode before we talk about it. So, we do get some scenes with the chicken lover. I think he's officially known as the snake oil salesman, but that's the name I give him in my head. Um, and yeah, I mean, he's just there for comic relief. He's skipping along, and then we cut to this scene where he's wrestling with a rad roach, and it's really, really, really funny. And then he's back on the road again, and everything's great. And then he's having a date, which is lovely. He's gone for tacos with a robot. This robot is called Fisto. This killed me when I watched it for the first time. So, for those that don't know, Fisto is a robot that's part of a quest. It's a quest that you do for the Atomic Wrangler casino, actually, where you have to acquire some talent for their establishment. We're talking sex workers, in case that wasn't already clear, to cater to some specific tastes. Fair enough, people can have their own tastes in that, as long as everybody consents and there's no children involved, then you largely can do what you like up to a point. That's fair enough. But um so so you're doing that quest for this casino, and one of the ones is a robot, so you have to either create, if your science skill is high enough, or acquire custom software and install it into a Protectron that's in Cerulean Robotics, which is located somewhere around Freeside. And the robot, its name becomes Fisto. I mean, when I realised he was talking to this robot like it was his girlfriend, I was literally laughing so hard that I had to pause. Because there's tears running down my face. It was so funny. Because I was hoping that maybe there would be like a couple of these sort of goofier things that would show up you know, from the game, and they delivered. Fisto is here having a date with the chicken guy, so here we are. But then Hank is suddenly there, and that's really, really creepy. Like, he's just, like, behind this guy, like, oh, super creepy. And then he knocks chicken liver out with a crowbar, putting an end to his date. And then we end up back in the secret facility, and Hank has one of the mind control devices on him, and they do pull off this kind of bait and switch because, like we've seen before, you know, he's turning up the dial, and then the camera pans away to the window, and we expect, you know, a mess. But there's no gore on the window this time. He's finally figured it out. He's finally got it working the way it's supposed to be, so that's great. And then we end up back here at the Wrangler, and the Ghoul being so kind to Lucy, and it's so bittersweet because he's about to betray her, and he knows he's about to betray her, and he obviously feels very guilty about this, but he's already made the decision, essentially, that of what he's going to do, because the much cleaner snake oil salesman appears, to tell them basically that if the Ghoul takes Lucy back to Vault 33, then Barb and Janie will be left alone in their cryo chambers and nothing will happen to them. But if they keep pursuing him, then, you know, he's obviously made threats towards the towards them, that something will happen to them, and we know that they are in this facility that Hank is working in. So the Ghoul fires a tranquilizer dart at Lucy to knock her out. Again, he's obviously trying to make it easier on her and probably make it easier on himself, to kind of deal with this. But you know, we are flipping back and forward during this whole scene between the past and the present. But Lucy wasn't immediately knocked out, and I think this is because of the addictol. So addictol is supposed to basically purge chems from your system and sort of basically speed run you through the withdrawal process of coming off of an addictive substance. So it's entirely feasible that something like that would reduce the effectiveness of other drugs that are introduced after taking the addictol. And in the meantime, in the past, pre-war, we're seeing Cooper Howard's downward spiral as he gets drunker and drunker, and he seems to just steal drinks out of people's hands and things, so he's really not having a good time. But Lucy then fights off the sedation enough to get her new toy out and plunge the Ghoul through a window. Obviously a fit of anger, because he's betrayed her, is fair enough. So he gets impaled on something, I'm guessing one of these things or something like that, who knows. But he gets impaled on something and he's kind of left there. I don't think it's enough to kill him, but probably to incapacitate him for a while. And then Hank arrives and he acts so tender and caring about Lucy, which makes me feel kind of icky. He obviously does still seem to care about her, but what lengths is he going to go to get her loyalty back? Because he knows that he's lost her loyalty because of what he did to Shady Sands. He knew that. The fact that she pointed a gun at his face, he knew that he'd lost her loyalty, and is he just going to try and manipulate her, or is he going to do something more sinister to kind of get her back on his side? I'm quite concerned about what's going to happen here. I don't think he's going to trek back to where Vault 33 is with her, so I think he's going to take her to the secret facility, wherever that is. And then finally, we talk about Buds and Norm. They make their way to the offices where Barb and Bud were based before the war, largely been left to rot. The receptionist is still there, and they make a joke about her dying at her desk, which is a bit, you know, interesting. But Norm spots fresh blood on the wall, and they can hear skittering or something in the elevator. But guess who's here? It's Mad June and Barb from Philly, which is just hilarious. I love these two. They're farming roaches in here, which is a bit of a career shift for them, but fair enough, it's probably quite lucrative. But Majin talks to Norm, and they, you know, talk about Lucy, and she gives him a summary of what's happened between the NCR and the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel and all the rest of it, and he's just like, I have no idea what any of that is, which he doesn't. He has no reason to know. Nobody in the vaults knows what's happening on the surface, really. And she's just like, yeah, your sister's dead. And he's like, I don't believe you. But he does seem just a bit lost, I think. I think Norm has realised that he's kind of a bit out of his depth at this point. But yeah, kind of love this little scene. And then they go upstairs to try and get the comms working. The Vault 31 crew want to get in touch with the investors. Whether anybody's going to reply or not, we don't really know. I don't know who's still around from all these. But, Norm is kind of starting to realise that he doesn't know enough to really navigate this situation, I think. But he spots Claudia crying and he goes to see her, and she's grieving her old life and everything that she's lost, including her cat, which is, it's kind of understandable because from her perspective, it's been a week since everything happened. She doesn't have any awareness of the 220 years nearly that have passed, and she was new to the job before this happened, so she wasn't really party to a lot of the secrets that the others might have been. And it's obviously hitting her quite hard, the realisation that everything she knew is gone, and now she's having to adapt to this new version of reality. It's very could see how it could be disconcerting and how it could be difficult to come to terms with, and it's going to have an emotional impact. That's just the nature of these things. But they end up going into Barb's office, and Norm is looking up what's been mentioned before as the Future Enterprise Ventures, which is an interesting phrase. It's kind of a weird thing, because enterprise and ventures kind of mean the same thing. But Claudia admits that she knows that Norm isn't Bud's successor. She has a feeling that he's not what he said he was, and he's been misleading these people. But she offers him a drink, so she goes off and leaves him. But we realise that Ronnie has been eavesdropping in the whole conversation. And Norm keeps working on the terminal. He can't find Future Enterprise Ventures in the database. But if Barb was involved in that, it would be accessible from her terminal. So he puts in the initials FEV. We know what that one is. Forced Evolutionary Virus. And that's where it gets a hit. And the Forced Evolutionary Virus is responsible for some of the most dangerous things in the wasteland, including super mutants and Deathclaws. So, yeah. But before Norm can read any further, Ronnie attacks, pulls the plug on the terminal, and strangles Norm with the cord. I really hope he's going to be okay. I don't believe that they'll kill him off. I suspect somebody might come and see what's happening and intervene. But obviously it's leaving us on a cliffhanger where we don't really know. But I really doubt that they would let Norm just discover FEV and then kill him off before he can do anything about it. I don't think that's going to be the case. But the storylines are moving forward, and I think we're going to start to see more intersections with the different characters and things. We haven't seen anything from Maximus and Thaddeus this episode, so how are they getting on running away from the Brotherhood with the cold fusion tech? Because once they realise that they've stolen it, they're going to come after them. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. I really enjoyed this episode. It was nothing that really fell that flat for me, but I'm quite concerned about our protagonists and all of the main characters, because all of them are getting themselves into a bit of a situation. So I guess we'll see what happens next week. So hopefully you enjoyed this. As always, I do love hearing your guys' comments and your thoughts on the episode. If there was anything you noticed that I missed or anything interesting, then I'm always open to chatting about it in the comments. And I will be back tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the ghost people of the Sierra Madre. So that's going to be the next Science of Folly episode, and I'm very much looking forward to it because the ghost people are really creepy, and I think they're really interesting. So I will catch you guys then. See ya.